Hello again, family and friends. I'm Paul Estabrooks. Today I want to share with you the third part of the story of the Millennium of Christianity celebrations in the Soviet Union. And that team that was put together by Maureen Giroux of Keston, Canada, a connection to the original Keston Institute in England, in those days known as Keston College. We went with a group to the Soviet Union in Easter season of 1988. And on our second week there, we broke up into 4 different groups going to Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and the Ukraine. The 4 of us who went to the Ukraine were Maureen, the group leader, and her roommate Rosemary, who was a journalist, a television journalist from CTV Toronto. And my roommate, of course, was Carl Lawrence, who I've told you about several times previously. My first boss at FEBC Radio, speaker at Haven of Rest Radio at the time that we went to the Soviet Union, and a very qualified journalist. And he put together a booklet about the whole trip called Glasnost and Believers in the Soviet Union. It's a 30-page booklet that Haven of Rest, or now called Haven Today, published in 1988 about our trip. We arrived in the Ukraine on a Monday of the second week, and we stayed at the Libid Hotel, which was downtown Kiev. Now, I mentioned last week with the story of Alexander Ogorodnikov that when we visited him in Moscow that day, it was Good Friday, our calendar of 1988. We visited him in between our 2 major meetings that we had with officials in Moscow. And after we came out of that visit to his office, the KGB people were there photographing us, and from that point on, we were followed every step by KGB. And, they didn't even try to hide it. It was a matter of intimidation. It was not a surreptitious observation of what we were doing. They just wanted to let us know that we couldn't do anything without their knowledge. And so, as we go to Ukraine, we think, maybe we get away from these guys in Moscow. Well, not so. Everywhere we went in the Ukraine, the KGB were following us. In fact, more so perhaps than even, obviously, than in Moscow. Every morning when I came down the elevator to the breakfast room, there was my man sitting there on the couch. I called him George, and he would never talk to me, but I would nod at him when I came out the elevator door, because as soon as I went out of the hotel, he was on my case. 10 steps behind me, always following. We were told, of course, never to use the telephones in the hotel because they were bugged. And so when I would phone the people I did need to talk to there, he would follow me 10 steps behind, out the door, down to a telephone booth that I was using. These were glass telephone booths, like maybe 4 of them side by side. I would stand in the first one on the phone talking. He would go to the very next one and stand there with his hand on his chin, watching me, letting me know that he's there every minute that I'm there. And everywhere I went, George followed behind. Now, we did do a half-day city tour on the Monday morning of our arrival. And, of course, who was behind us but a little Lada with 2 KGB agents, and they followed our bus. We're on a tourist bus, and these guys follow our bus everywhere we go, and when we get off the bus, they get out of their Lada. They're KGB because they had no problem just parking in places that are not supposed to be for parking. And of course, we could always tell by their shiny shoes and their leather jackets. They were so obvious. And they would follow us everywhere we went. Well, the night we were chased was the Tuesday night. 2 of the nights, Maureen and Rosemary stayed in one room, and Maureen was of Roman Catholic background, and so she went to visit the Catholic churches in Ukraine while we were there, and at least those that had offices in Kiev. And Carl and I were both evangelicals, and we were going to go to the Baptist church. We found out where it was, and that there were 2 services, because this was their Holy Week. Now we're into their Holy Week on the Julian calendar. On Tuesday night and Thursday night, they were having evening meetings, and so we decided to go to both. So on Tuesday night, we went to the Baptist church in Kiev. They had a membership of over 2,000 people, but their sanctuary would only hold 200 in those days. I've been there since, and in a later program, I'll tell you more about what it's like today in that city for them. But it was packed. I mean, there were people sitting out in the courtyard listening through a loudspeaker to what was going on inside. Could not get inside. But of course, being guests as we were, we had no trouble. We got there early and had a chance to meet with the pastors, taken to the pastors. It was a young lady who met us at the door who spoke English, and her name was Luba Dubrenko. And Luba took us to the pastors and introduced us and explained to them who we were, why we were there, and that we were Christians from Canada, Carl from USA. Beside us was a young man who spoke quite good English too. At the end of the service, he said, my name is Anatoly Kaluzhny. I would love to have you come to our home. Nadia is there, and she's preparing supper, and I'm sure she'll have enough supper for all of us. Would you like to come for supper to my home? And I would like to talk to you. He didn't feel comfortable talking there, even in the church. So we agreed. Of course, we had nothing else on our schedule for Tuesday night. So we go off with Anatoly Kaluzhny. And I might mention that Luba Dubrenko sang a solo and while playing the piano for herself that night. Beautiful piano player, great vocalist at the service. And I was to meet her again later and meet her twin sister and her twin sister's husband, which is a story for, let's say, probably 3 weeks from today. We get into Anatoly Kaluzhny's car. He also has a small Lada car. He said at the time that his job was making ice for the arena, the skating arena in the city. And he obviously was certainly a little better off than others because he had a nice little car. And we got in the Lada with Anatoly. And of course, what happens? But boom, right behind us, they had sat outside the church the whole evening, is the KGB car following us again. And Anatoly goes, bang, he bangs on the steering wheel and he goes, man, we live with this all the time. He says, I think I know how to lose them, but then they may still know where I live. Well, he took off. And we did the super speed car thing through the streets, around the corners, and he actually did lose them, which was incredible driving. And we get to his apartment building, and he says, quick, let's get inside. And so we jump out of the car, we walk quickly into the elevator, and we're standing at the elevator, pushing the button for the elevator, and we hear these feet running down the hall outside. These they were 4 feet. 2 KGB guys had thought they had lost us, and now they were trying to catch up to us. And they were running around, and they came around the corner to the hallway where we were standing in front of the elevator. And it was almost like Roadrunner cartoons. They go, and they put on the brakes. They skid to a stop because they're running fast. Then they see us and they skid to a stop, and then they casually walk down the hall. And as the elevator door opens, we get in. Now, if you aren't aware of elevators in Russia, or especially the old Soviet Union, in their apartment buildings, these were tiny elevators. In fact, if you put 4 people into that elevator, you would be standing nose to nose, 4 people. Now, there were 3 of us. We got on first. There was Anatoly Kaluzhny, and Carl Lawrence, and then I get in. Well, and the 2 KGB guys are not going to be left out of this. These are the guys who are chasing us. And so they squeeze into that elevator too. And now we have 5 big guys in an elevator that is not even built for 4. And you could smell each other's garlic breath. We were so close together. It was almost hilarious, because what do you say? What do you do when you know these KGB guys are on your tail and they're standing there, virtually nose to nose with you? Well, Anatoly was very smart. He did not push any of the buttons on the elevator. He just stood there and waited. So finally, somebody had to push a button to make the elevator go. And so one of the KGB guys pushed number 4, and the other guy pushed number 5. And so the elevator goes up to number 4, one guy gets off, and it goes up to number 5, the second guy gets off, and now we're on it alone. And we could hear them outside the elevator, because it was beside the stairway. You hear them running up the stairs. Now they're running up the stairs, because we're still going further up, and they want to know where we're going. And they go running up the stairs. Well, it turns out that Anatoly lived on the 6th floor. And so we pushed 6, then he pushed 6, and we get off at 6. Well, now they've been running up, and now we're there, and so they have to run back. So they run halfway back down the stairs again to that little area between the railings on the stairs where you can look up and see there's that open space in any staircases, And they're down there staring up at us, and we're walking across the 6th floor, and we're staring down at them. And I said to Anatoly, listen, if this is going to cause problems for you, brother, we'll be happy just to go back to our hotel if this is really going to cause you trouble. And he says, no. He says, we live with this all the time. He says, we're not doing anything wrong, but they just want to know what we're doing and who you are seeing. And come on in. So we go into the apartment and we meet Nadja and his cute little 4-year-old daughter, Anya. And we took their picture. And this is what their family looked like. And the picture of Anya is one that I've used over the years for a lovely little Ukrainian girl. And as she was, and now today a married woman with children. Anya and her mother, Nadia, and Anatoly welcomed us royally. Nadia said, I will make supper for all of us. Now remember, this is after an evening service, so by now it's probably 9:30, 10 o'clock. And Anatoly says, I wanted you to come here because I want you to see the project I'm working on. I'm working with another group of church leaders in this country to make a modern translation of the Bible into Ukrainian. Not Russian, Ukrainian. Now remember, these are nationals, and they are very nationalistic. And this was his exciting project, and he whipped out all these things under the couch. He had them hidden in the bottom of the couch. And we looked at these, and he says, while you're looking at them, do you mind if I listen to my favorite radio program? It's on tonight. It was Tuesday night at 10 o'clock, his time. And so we said, no, it's fine. We're not in any hurry. So he turns on the radio program. It was in Russian, and it came from Transworld Radio in Monte Carlo. And he listened for a half an hour. Nadia sitting at his side. The two of them loved this program. And what blew me away was at the end of the program, on comes an English announcement on this Russian program that says, this program, Wings of Faith or whatever it was called, was produced in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada. And I thought, isn't that incredible? Here I am from Canada. I'm way over in Ukraine for the first time, and I'm listening to a Christian radio program that was produced in Oshawa, in my home province. And it was just amazing. And it was amazing to see how impacting radio is for people. They, even with guests in their house, they didn't want to miss their favorite program that night, and they listened to it. And we had wonderful fellowship. We learned many things from Anatoly about the church and the situation for Christians in the country and the challenges that that whole area was facing. And we talked till midnight. And finally at midnight, Nadia said, "Look, guys, you're going to have to come have supper or it's going to be cold." She had made supper, and at midnight, with all three of their family there, little Anya was still up in her little house coat. We had supper together, and it was a wonderful night. We actually enjoyed that meal and discussion with both of them again till about 1:45 in the morning. It's 1:45 when finally we said, "Look, we've been up all day and we're a little tired. We should probably head back to the hotel." So he said, "Okay, I'll take you." And we went down to the car. We didn't see any KGB guys at this point. We thought, "Whoa, what's going on?" And we get in the car, and as soon as we take off from the parking lot, two lights are right behind us, and he goes, bang, he bangs on the steering wheel again, and he says, "You just can't get away from these guys." And he took us back to the hotel. It was about 2:00 in the morning when we arrived at the hotel, and he dropped us off at the side street of the Libid Hotel. And as we got out and started walking to the front door, we had to kind of go around to the front. We were at the side of the building. Here were a whole bunch of KGB cars. These were all Ladas. That's all they drove in those days. And these guys with their shiny shoes and jackets are all standing at the side of their car. And they'd be about maybe 15 feet to our left of the sidewalk that we were walking on as we're heading to the front door of the hotel. And one of them yells out, very interesting. I think he may have been a guy who watched Laugh-In the old days on American television. So he goes, "Very interesting. Posing like tourists." And I say to Carl, "What's this guy's problem? We are tourists. We're just visiting with Christians." And I start to walk over to talk to this guy. I'm going to set him straight. And Carl grabs me by the collar and he says, "We are going into the hotel." And he dragged me with him through the front door into the hotel. I never got to talk to the KGB boys, but they bothered us and followed us everywhere we went. The next day, Maureen said, "We have a visit with some dissidents here, and not too many of us should go." And both Carl and Rosemary said, "We don't want to go. We're fine, because the KGB guys are going to be watching you every move, including the people you meet." And so Maureen, in her very inconspicuous red coat, she had a red coat the color of my sweater, and hardly was inconspicuous. She and I went up the street to the park where we were asked to come to meet with three significant leading dissidents who were Ukrainian Christians. Vyacheslav Chernovil, Oles Shevchenko, and the editor of the Ukrainian Herald newspaper. And all I remember about his name, either his first or last name, was Stus. And these three guys were sitting on a park bench waiting for us. And so the five of us shared together. They told us the whole challenge that everybody, not just Christians, but everybody in the Ukraine was facing at that moment under the heavy hand of Soviet rulers and leaders. And classic dissidents, they shared with us what they were doing in protesting and living, not willing to live the lie that the Soviet ideology was communicating. We had a great meeting there. We are sure that the KGB were sitting somewhere, probably across the street with binoculars, watching every move we made. But the saddest part of the story is that nothing happened immediately to these men because they met with us and shared the situation. But within several years after that meeting, all three of those men experienced what we would call suspicious deaths. They lost their lives ultimately for the cause that they were supporting in freedom for the Ukraine, which of course, as you know, came in 1991. In August, I believe it was the 27th or the 25th, it's late 20s of the month in August 1991, the Ukraine declared independence. And a year later, when they celebrated their first anniversary of independence, I was able to go back to Ukraine with my wife Diane for her first visit to her family's country, and that'll be a story for another day. On that trip, however, we did meet with Anatoly, Kaluzhny, and Nadia and Anya, and here's how Anya had developed in those 3 years since the first picture I took of her. And as I mentioned, today she's a married mother of several children. And Anatoly and Nadia have been incredibly significant leaders in the Christian community of evangelicals in Kiev. Today he's the pastor of a significant church, of a ministry that he founded. His first connections with the West after Ukraine opened was with Bill Bright and Campus Crusade for Christ. And then he established a ministry and a church called New Life. And I was able to speak at that church 4 years ago, when I was back in the Ukraine with our granddaughter, Cassandra. And I'll share about that another day. But it was incredible to be always followed by the KGB. We met the singer at the church, Luba Dubrenko, and in 3 weeks' time, I'll tell you her story and her twin sister and the twin sister's husband. We have a funny story about our time together at that trip and later, which is really significant. But what they needed, they're singers, and they were producing cassettes, Christian music cassettes, to circulate through the country. They needed a boombox that had a tape duplication system inside, where you have one that plays back and the other one that records. And Luba told me they have one of these at the dollar store where you have to pay dollars, not rubles. And I said, great, I'll buy one for you. Be happy to. So we made an appointment on Thursday afternoon to go there. And she said, we're going to have to do this very quickly and carefully because we'll be watched every step of the way on this one. And I don't want them to confiscate this thing. So we bought this boombox at the store, and she had arranged someone to drive us there, but not to take us away after because of the risk of there being suspicious involvement. So a young man whom she later married, who today is her husband, Vasily Mitsut. Vasily came with his little Lada, and he picked us up with a boombox, and he drove like crazy over to this apartment building where Luba had an elderly lady friend who had an apartment there, where she said it'd be a good place to hide it. But of course, the KGB followed us all the way across town to there. So Luba says, come with me and be fast. We're going to be fast. So we jump out of the car. We run into the back door of the apartment building, because there were other apartment buildings there too, and they couldn't necessarily see which one we went into if we did it quickly. And so we quickly went in there. Then we ran down the hall to the apartment. She banged on the door really loud because she needed, and she's calling to the lady in either Ukrainian or Russian. They spoke both of them fluently. And the lady opened the door and she handed her the boombox. Quick, put this in such and such a closet, she told her. And don't let anybody know you have it. And so, bang, shut the door. And then we run down the hall to the front of the building, and we exit out the front of the apartment building. And nobody was behind us at this point. And we hail a taxi. And we get in the taxi, and as we are just taking off in the taxi, out the door come these KGB guys running at top speed, and they keep running after the car. And I wasn't sure what they wanted. I think they just wanted to get the license number of the car, probably, so that they could have somebody follow us. But I turned around and looked out the back window, and one of the KGB guys has a watch, which is like my current Apple Watch that my granddaughter gave me. And he's talking into the watch. It was like Dick Tracy all over again. He actually had they actually had a two-way system where he could communicate to some others. And he probably read them the license plate number from our car. That was the only experience that I knowingly was chased by the KGB this whole first trip to the Ukraine on the year of the Millennium of Christianity in the Soviet Union. Well, Carl and I both went home, and I only met Carl once after that. It was when he was speaking at Mission Fest in Vancouver, Canada. He was an excellent speaker, and he was scheduled to do that. And of course, I was there every year with Paul Johnson, my Canadian colleague. We had a little prison cell that we set up to resemble or just represent prisons and Christian prisoners around the world. And we would spend hours sitting in that cell talking to people about those Christians we knew around the world who were suffering for their faith in a prison situation. Well, at the end of the time, I had a picture taken with Carl. Either Paul or my buddy Jim Cunningham took this picture. And this is the last time I saw Carl Lawrence. And it was at the end of his speaking engagement. And I was able to get away from our booth in order to listen to Carl's last message that night. And so I walked in just at the time that Carl was starting to speak. And I sat down at an empty seat fairly near the front, because that was about the only place there were seats. The place was packed full. And Carl looked at me and he said, "Well, I see my friend Paul Estabrooks has come to join us tonight." He says, "Friends, you can be sure that the Chinese secret police and the KGB are not far away."